Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. In Saudi Arabia, Gulf leaders have signed an agreement to end their 3-year diplomatic dispute with Qatar at the 41st GCC summit. This comes a day after Saudi Arabia reopened its airspace, land and sea borders with Qatar to end the blockade. The OIC has urged its member states and the United Nations to press India to release Kashmiri human rights activist Asyan Darabi. In a statement, the Human Rights Commission of the OIC condemned the detention of Darabi on fabricated charges of espionage. And Darabi risks conviction by a sham Indian court on the 18th of January. She is the founder of a Kashmiri rights group, Daughters of the Nation. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has cancelled a planned trip to India later this month, citing the need to oversee the pandemic response at home. A Downing Street spokeswoman said the Prime Minister has informed his Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi, that he will be unable to visit India. The cancellation comes at the time when India is grappling with farmers' agitation over the contentious agricultural laws. The UK has announced its third national lockdown as the new strain of COVID-19 takes the country by a storm. The lockdown, likely to last till mid-February, was imposed after over 50,000 cases were detected for 3 straight days. Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported over 1,900 cases and 59 deaths overnight as the nation's toll tops 10,400. Globally, there are more than 1.8 million fatalities and 85 million infections. And in cricket, South Africa beat Sri Lanka by 10 wickets in the second test to clean sweep the 2-match series. Dean Algar was named man of the match and series. He scored 253 runs in the series. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Saudi Arabia, Gulf leaders have signed an agreement to end their 3-year diplomatic dispute with Qatar. The landmark deal was signed at the 41st summit of the Gulf Cooperation Council in Riyadh. More in this report.
In 2017, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt cut diplomatic and trade ties with Qatar. They accused Doha of supporting terrorist groups and being too close to Iran, allegations that Qatar has consistently denied. Amid rising tensions with Iran in recent months, the US intensified pressure for a resolution of the dispute. This finally led to Saudi Arabia reopening its airspace, land and sea borders with Qatar after 3 years of blockade. After signing the deal at today's GCC summit, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said there is a desperate need for a unified Gulf region to confront threats posed by Iran. While the developments marks a major milestone towards resolving the Gulf crisis, the path to full reconciliation is far from guaranteed. Experts believe the rift between Abu Dhabi and Doha has been deepest, with the two sides at sharp ideological odds.
The OIC has urged its member states and the United Nations to press India to release Kashmiri human rights activist Asiya Andarabi. In a statement, the Human Rights Commission of the OIC condemned the illegal detention of Andarabi on fabricated charges of espionage. Andarabi risks conviction by a sham Indian court on the 18th of January. She is the founder of a Kashmiri rights group, Daughters of the Nation. Andarabi has been languishing in Indian custody since 2016 and is currently lodged in the coronavirus-infested Tihar jail. Earlier, Pakistan sought UN intervention to prevent the judicial murder of Andarabi. Kashmiris across the world are observing the right to self-determination day. The United Nations had adopted a resolution on January 5, 1949 that pledged a free and impartial plebiscite. What in this report?
As occupied Jammu and Kashmir bleeds under New Delhi's annexation, Kashmiris on both sides of the line of control and across the world mark the right to self-determination day, under tyranny, misery, and ethnic cleansing. 72 years ago on this day in 1949, the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution guaranteeing the Kashmiris their inalienable right to self-determination. Pakistan's President Arif Alvi has reaffirmed commitment to the just cause of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. In a series of tweets, Prime Minister Imran Khan has renewed the country's pledge to stand unequivocally with the Kashmiri people in their struggle for freedom. Imran Khan said Pakistan stands unequivocally with the Kashmiris in their struggle for freedom. Khan slammed the Indian tyranny in Kashmir, calling it one of the most ruthless, inhumane, and illegal occupations in modern history. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said the world has rejected India's attempts to alter the disputed status of the occupied valley. Meanwhile, the Kashmiri leaders have slammed the United Nations and global leaders for their criminal silence amid the increasing Indian atrocities in the valley. They say the people of Kashmir await the fulfillment of the United Nations pledge for a lasting and peaceful resolution to the Kashmir dispute. Since Kashmir's annexation on the 5th of August in 2019, New Delhi's unprecedented and unabated oppression has claimed hundreds of lives under its inhumane military siege. Despite COVID-19 pandemic, India has deprived Kashmiris of their basic right to life, health, and food.
A top-level army huddle says the Indian occupation forces have failed to suppress Kashmiri's freedom struggle despite decades of atrocities. The meeting, which was chaired by Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa, expressed solidarity with the Kashmiris. For more on this, we are joined by Gohar Gilani, a renowned Kashmiri journalist from Srinagar. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Gilani. First of all, Kashmiris across the world are observing the right to self-determination day today. Well, Pakistan has pledged its support to the Kashmiri people. How do you think can the world play its role in curbing Indian atrocities in occupied Kashmir?
See, at a time when the demand from the Kashmir Valley and from the families who are losing their young ones is that the government should return their bodies. I mean, when the questions are about existence and survival, these solidarity campaigns are important, but at the same time, the challenges in Kashmir are very different. These are about identity, these are about existence, these are about demography, and these are about, like, people are not saying don't kill us, but they are saying please return the bodies. The situation is that bad.
So, Mr. Gilani, Pakistan has been raising the Kashmiris' voice at all the international forums. How Kashmiris see Islamabad's efforts for highlighting Kashmir issue?
I think UN has already published a couple of reports on Kashmir, but the situation on the ground does not seem to be changing. On the other hand, the situation on the ground is getting worse by the day, and there's a lot of challenge that people are facing on every single front, and they are saying that when it's about their existence, and this existence challenge, according to key Kashmir watchers, is the biggest ever existence challenge that Kashmir has faced for many decades, many centuries, in fact.
Mr. Gohar Gilani, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. We really appreciate that. Now, moving on, Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has cancelled a planned trip to India later this month, citing the need to oversee the pandemic response at home. A Downing Street spokeswoman said the Prime Minister has informed his Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi, that he will be unable to visit India. The cancellation comes at the time when India is grappling with farmers' protests over agricultural laws. In December, over 12,000 farmers signed a petition calling on the UK Prime Minister to cancel his visit to India on the Republic Day. The petition says if Johnson visits India, he will be endorsing the violation of human rights of the farmers. Meanwhile, protesting farmers have blamed the Narendra Modi government's ego problems for the deadlock. This comes after the 7th round of talks between the government and the farmers ended inconclusively. A union leader says they will only discuss the minimum support price and repeal of laws. Both the sides have agreed to meet again on Friday. Thousands of farmers have been camping at Delhi borders since late November against reforms they say favor corporates. 3 farmers have committed suicide in the protests. The UN assistance mission in Afghanistan has welcomed the resumption of intra-Afghan peace talks in Doha. In a statement, it said the government and Taliban must grab this opportunity to move ahead towards lasting peace in the country. This comes as Taliban negotiators have left for Doha to resume the 2nd round of talks after nearly 3 weeks of break. Kabul says the talks will focus on ways to reduce violence and reach a ceasefire. Meanwhile, the government claimed to have killed at least 38 Taliban fighters in Kandahar province. The Taliban say they have shot dead 2 Afghan soldiers in the Ghazni province. Earlier, Pakistan and the US expressed concerns on the growing violence in Afghanistan. South Korea is sending a delegation to Iran to seek the release of a tanker seized in Gulf waters by Iran. Foreign Ministry spokesman Choi Yong-sam said the delegate will also discuss previously pending issues. The incident comes amid tensions over Iranian funds frozen in South Korean banks due to US sanctions. South Korea has also summoned Iranian envoy to Seoul for the early release of the tanker and its crew, while Iran has rejected the allegation that seizure of the vessel amounts to hostage-taking. Iran says the ship violated pollution rules, which its operators deny. The tanker is carrying a cargo of more than 7,000 tons of ethanol with 20 crew members on board. Iran has rejected Israeli accusations of seeking to manufacture nuclear weapons by enriching uranium up to 20%. Deputy Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said a regime with nuclear weapons cannot level accusations at Tehran. Meanwhile, the US State Department said Iran's decision to enrich uranium is a clear attempt to increase its campaign of nuclear extortion. It said Iran's attempts to manufacture nuclear weapons will continue to fail. The European Union has also warned that Iran's plans will have serious nuclear non-proliferation implications. Meanwhile, China has urged all the parties to practice restraint and avoid taking steps that may worsen tensions. Iran has unveiled its military drones ahead of a combat drills in Semnan province. Iran's Armed Forces Chief of Staff Major General Mohammad Bagheri also visited the site. The drill comes amid heightened tensions between Iran and the United States. State media says hundreds of UAVs, including suicide drones, will be used in the drill. It said the exercise will be conducted in both air-to-air and air-to-ground combat. Israeli forces have shot dead a Palestinian in the occupied West Bank. The incident happened near an Israeli settlement in the town of Bethlehem. The Palestinian Health Ministry confirmed the man's death, but said it doesn't have details of his identity. Dozens of Palestinians have been killed by Israeli occupation forces in 2020. Earlier, Israeli settlers attacked Palestinians in occupied East Jerusalem. Israeli settlements in the occupied territories of Palestine are illegal under international law. The UK has announced its third national lockdown as the new variant of COVID-19 takes the country by a storm. The lockdown, likely to last till mid-February, was imposed after over 50,000 cases were detected for 3 straight days. Globally, there are more than 1.8 million fatalities and 85 million infections. More in this report.
As the hopes of massive coronavirus vaccination drives across the globe by the end of 2020 sputtered out, the world faces staggering new challenges. 8 Canadian politicians resigned or demoted after traveling internationally over Christmas holidays despite advisories to avoid non-essential trips. In the U.S., the virus is pushing the country's socio-economic infrastructure to the brink. 1 American is dying every 33 seconds as the vaccine rollout hits snags, with more than 2/3 of the 15 million doses shipped within the U.S. going unused. Meanwhile, in California, the rate of infections is at its highest as ambulance crews are told not to transport patients unless they have significant chances of survival.
Take a look more, I think, closely at that 7-day average, 336 lives lost, families torn apart because of this pandemic. Just put it in perspective, the last 14 days, close to 4,000 Californians have lost their lives. This is a deadly disease. This is a deadly pandemic. It remains more deadly today at any point in the history of this pandemic.
In Ireland, hospitals are failing to manage the fast-growing outbreak as cases surpass those recorded in the first wave. The French government says a group of 30 citizens will be selected at random to represent the concerns of the public and advise the government's vaccination strategy. Meanwhile, PM Boris Johnson announced blanket curbs lasting over 5 weeks in England and warned the weeks ahead will be the hardest yet.
As I speak to you tonight, our hospitals are under more pressure from COVID than at any time since the start of the pandemic. In England alone, the number of COVID patients in hospitals has increased by nearly a third in the last week to almost 27,000. And that number is 40% higher than the first peak in April.
In Germany, the health ministry is mulling delaying second doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to make scarce supplies go further. However, manufacturers warn they have no evidence their drug will continue to work if the booster shot was given later than tested in trials. Over in Oceania, officials have warned that the outbreak in Australia's largest city, Sydney, may have spread to 3 adjacent cities.
In Pakistan, 59 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This takes the country's death toll to over 10,409. Health officials reported 1,947 new infections overnight. Meanwhile, more than 35,000 active COVID-19 cases have been detected in the country. The health ministry says out of over 490,000 countrywide cases, more than 444,000 people have recovered. The ministry said over 219,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province. Punjab has reported nearly 141,000 cases. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden and outgoing President Donald Trump have held rallies in Georgia ahead of Senate runoffs today. Georgia's Senate runoff election will determine which party controls the 100-member upper house of the country. More in this report.
With the U.S. bracing for a change in White House, the state of Georgia is set to determine the reins of the power corridors in Washington. The act of the U.S. Senate can only be undone through a presidential veto. President-elect Joe Biden hit the campaign trail in the battleground state, urging Georgians to vote for Democrats. Speaking in Atlanta, Biden said the election's result could chart the course, not just for the 4 years, but for the next generation. He said voters in Georgia had the power to change America.
I know this campaign has been exhausting. You put the hard work in over the last few years to get to this moment. It's been intense. It's been nonstop. But I'm asking you to give everything you've got one more day. One more day. And that one more day, this is not hyperbole. You can change America.
On the other hand, President Donald Trump also claimed potential victory for Republicans in the runoffs. Rallying in Dalton, Trump warned that the Georgia runoff is the last line of defense against Democratic control of the Senate. If Republicans win one or both the seats in today's runoffs, they will retain their control over the Senate.
Watch what happens over the next couple of weeks. You watch what's going to come out. Watch what's going to be revealed. You watch. And I have to tell you that the stakes of this election could not be higher.
If Democrats win both the seats, the 100-member chamber will split 50-50, extending the tie-breaking vote to Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. Meanwhile, Georgia's top election official, Brad Raffensperger, debunked Trump's accusations of widespread voter fraud.
Australia and Mexico have offered asylum to WikiLeaks co-founder Julian Assange. In an interview, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said if the appeal fails, Assange can return to Australia. The Aussie Prime Minister said the case is in a British court where Canberra is not a party, but he can offer Assange consular support. Meanwhile, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has also offered political asylum to Assange. Obrador said he wanted his foreign minister to ask London if they can release Assange so Mexico could offer him refuge. Earlier, a UK court denied a US request to extradite Assange, citing mental health concerns. At least 22 people have been killed in an overnight raid by militants in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Local authorities said the militants killed the residents of Mvenda village with machetes and guns. Authorities blame the Allied Democratic Forces for the attack. According to a UN report, more than 1,000 civilians were killed in attacks by the ADF in 2019 and 20. Sudan says it will not take part in direct talks with Egypt and Ethiopia over Addis Ababa's dam on River Nile. In a statement, Sudan's Water Resources and Irrigation Ministry said Khartoum wants talks mediated by the African Union. Khartoum said it received an invitation for a direct tripartite meeting. Instead of a response to Sudan's request for a trilateral meeting with the AU experts and observers, it demanded that all future talks must proceed with the bloc's mediation. Earlier, South Africa, in its capacity as chair of the AU, announced the resumption of talks between the three parties after a month. In India, wildlife authorities in the central Mandsaur city found crows with symptoms of bird flu after carcasses of birds were reported in the area. In western Junagadh city, around 53 carcasses of birds, including herons, ducks, were found. The reason for death is yet to be ascertained, but laboratory examination confirmed the presence of bird flu. In Palestine, a young girl with a spinal tumor turned to horse riding to improve her posture, but it did more than that and help her regain some sensation in her legs. Find out more in this report.
12-year-old Lian in Palestine opted for horse riding sessions after a spinal tumor diagnosis. The sessions also helped gain some sensation in her limbs that had been affected by the tumor.
When I first started riding the horse, I did not have feeling in my legs. I used to be afraid while riding. Afterwards, and thank God, I started regaining sensation in my legs. So I started to know how to ride and perform other exercises.
Lian's father says after her chemotherapy in 2017, they tried aquatic and physiotherapy, but nothing alleviated her pain. According to Lian's instructor Al-Natche, a single brush with horse riding started to show improvement in her legs.
When she started, she had immense suppleness in her back and could not hold it straight. The way she is sitting now was not apparent then. She used to have a loss of balance. Currently, she can do her exercises. Her father and I used to help her, one from each side. Today, she can do it on her own. Do the back exercises, Lian.
Al-Natche claims that horseback riding has many therapeutic benefits, especially for children with autism and other disabilities. He says it is safe since horses are very sensitive to their riders and will act accordingly.
Bolivia's Tuni Glacier is disappearing faster than initially anticipated. Scientists say the predicament will likely add to the water shortages plaguing the capital La Paz, just 60 miles away. More in this report.
Most of the world's glaciers have been shrinking since the end of the Little Ice Age in the mid-19th century. The loss of a mass accelerated in the late 1970s, and the tropical Andes is thought to be the fastest since the early 18th century. Scientists who monitor the Tuni and other regional glaciers say the once sprawling glacier has been reduced to just 1 square kilometer.
We're talking about 40 years. We have seen that a significant part of these glaciers, the front of this terminal moraine, has already retreated between 600 to 800 meters.
Across much of the icy field, now only discolored rock exposed for the first time in centuries remains. The changing climate and fast disappearing glaciers have coincided with a move from the countryside to the cities of Bolivia, pressuring already frail water sources. Farmers who grow quinoa in the town of Villacha, about 25 kilometers from the city of La Paz, say their crop has suffered.
It has not rained for months. I think it's because of climate change, because Mother Nature is angry and it does not rain. In November, we have been punished by a cold snap for 2 weeks and quinoa production died. And now the sun is strong and strong heat has dried the quinoa.
While the populations located at the foot of the Andes do not depend entirely on water from Bolivia's high Andean glaciers, scientists say the mountain ice has fed rivers used for irrigations of crops at least 20% of the water supply of La Paz.
In Italy, heavy snowfall continued to hit the northern Alpine region after a weekend of extreme weather. It left some residential areas completely snowed in. The Alpine Adriatic Meteorological Society says more than 6 feet of snow fell in the mountainous area of Comelico, close to Austria. A video showed snow blocking the entrances to homes and buildings. As it continued to fall in the small village of Sappada in the region of Friuli, Venezia, Giulia, firefighters, civil protection units and alpine rescue teams worked to clear the snow. More snowfall is expected to continue in the region in the coming days. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Lows and the highs of the business world. OPEC Plus will resume talks today amid a deadlock over February's oil output levels. The unusual decision to push negotiations into a second day was taken after a 3-hour debate in a virtual meeting. Saudi Arabia argued against pumping more oil due to new lockdowns. Saudi Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman said markets are still fragile and the new variant of coronavirus is unpredictable, while Russia led calls for higher production, citing recovering demand. Earlier, OPEC Secretary General Mohammed Barkindo warned member states of downside risks facing the oil market. Wall Street stocks have traded high, recovering some of their sharp losses from the previous session. Traders have also turned their focus to two key elections in Georgia. Rising COVID-19 cases globally and new lockdown restrictions continue to keep investors on the edge. But a 2% surge in the shares of Boeing led the Dow Jones Industrial Average higher. Nasdaq Composite traded over 0.5% higher, while S&P 500 also gained ground. Meanwhile, oil prices inched up as tension around Iran's seizure of a South Korean vessel simmered and possible production cut by the OPEC+. Starting the world of sports with cricket, South Africa beat Sri Lanka by 10 wickets in the second test to clean sweep the two-match series. Dean Elgar was named man of the match and series for amassing 253 in the series. The hosts achieved 67 runs target without losing any wicket after bowling Sri Lanka out for 211 in the second innings. Dimuth Karunaratne was the top scorer of Sri Lanka with 103 runs, while Lunginigidi was the pick of the bowlers for his 4 for 44. South Africa will now travel to Pakistan to play two-match and three-match T20 series starting from 26th of January. Meanwhile, Pakistan are batting at 8 for losing a wicket at the stumps of the third day in the final test against New Zealand. The visitors trailed New Zealand by 354 runs in Christchurch. The Kiwis declared their first innings, amassing 659 runs for the loss of 6 wickets. New Zealand skipper Kane Williamson played a stellar innings of 238 runs. The left-handed Henry Nicholls also bagged his 7th Test century early on day 3, scoring 157. Nicholls and Williamson built a 369-run partnership for their 4th wicket, highest in tests between New Zealand and Pakistan. Shaheen Afridi and Mohammad Abbas took 2 wickets each. New Zealand lead the two-match test series 1-0. Moving on to football, Southampton beat leaders Liverpool 1-0 in their Premier League encounter. The defeat comes as a setback to Liverpool's title defence. Southampton's forward Danny Ings scored a superb decider in the second minute with an assist from James Ward-Prowse. This was Southampton's first win in 5 league games, helping them climb to 6th place with 29 points. The Reds retain their position atop the league table, level on 33 points with Manchester United. United are set to leapfrog the Reds if they win their games in hand. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.